The Vietnam War was not a simple conflict between two nations, but a deeply complex struggle rooted in colonial history, Cold War rivalry, and competing ideologies. What began as a fight for independence would evolve into one of the most controversial and studied wars of the 20th century, drawing in global powers and reshaping military strategy, politics, and public opinion for decades. Before the United States became involved, Vietnam was part of French Indochina, ruled as a colony. Resistance movements formed over time, driven by nationalism and opposition to foreign control. These tensions eventually erupted into armed conflict, setting the stage for a much larger and more complicated war that would follow in the years ahead. Ho Chi Minh became the central figure in Vietnam's struggle for independence. Combining nationalist goals with communist ideology, he organized resistance against French forces. His leadership would prove instrumental in shaping the direction of the conflict, turning a local independence movement into part of a broader global ideological struggle. In 1954, Vietnamese forces achieved a decisive victory over the French at Dien Bien Phu. This battle marked the end of French colonial control and demonstrated the effectiveness of determined local resistance against a major colonial power, fundamentally altering the political landscape of the region. The Geneva Accords temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel into North and South. Intended as a short-term solution leading to national elections, the division instead created two opposing governments, each backed by different global powers, setting the stage for further conflict. Ngo Dinh Diem led South Vietnam with strong support from the United States. However, his government faced internal opposition, allegations of corruption, and growing unrest among the population, weakening its stability at a critical moment. The Viet Cong, a guerrilla force operating within South Vietnam, began carrying out attacks against government targets. Their ability to blend into civilian populations and use unconventional tactics made them difficult to defeat using traditional military methods. Fearing the spread of communism, the United States began increasing its presence in Vietnam. What started as advisory support gradually escalated into direct military involvement, transforming the conflict into a major Cold War confrontation. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident in 1964 provided the justification for a significant escalation of U.S. military involvement. It marked a turning point, leading to the deployment of combat troops and expanded military operations. Operation Rolling Thunder launched a prolonged bombing campaign against North Vietnam. The objective was to weaken its ability to support insurgent forces in the South, but the campaign also intensified the conflict and caused widespread destruction. American soldiers entering Vietnam encountered dense jungles, extreme heat, and an enemy that was often invisible. The environment itself became a major challenge, complicating operations and increasing the difficulty of traditional military strategies. The Viet Cong relied heavily on guerrilla tactics, including ambushes and rapid retreats. These methods allowed smaller forces to challenge larger, more heavily equipped units effectively, shifting the nature of the conflict. Extensive tunnel systems allowed fighters to move, hide, and launch attacks without being detected. These networks became a crucial part of the insurgency strategy, providing both protection and mobility. The use of helicopters revolutionized troop movement, allowing rapid deployment and evacuation. This innovation became one of the defining features of the Vietnam War, changing how battles were fought. The use of Agent Orange aimed to remove dense vegetation that provided cover for enemy forces. While it had tactical purposes, it also caused long-term environmental damage and health issues that continued to affect populations long after the war ended. The Tet Offensive in 1968 marked a turning point in the war. Despite heavy losses, it demonstrated the capability of North Vietnamese forces and had a significant impact on public perception of the conflict, particularly in the United States. As the war intensified overseas, opposition grew within the United States. Large-scale protests erupted across universities and major cities, reflecting a deepening divide in public opinion and increasing pressure on political leaders. President Richard Nixon introduced Vietnamization, a strategy aimed at transferring combat responsibilities to South Vietnamese forces while reducing American troop involvement. Its effectiveness remained uncertain as the war continued. Military operations extended into neighboring Cambodia in an effort to disrupt supply lines. This expansion increased the complexity of the conflict and intensified both regional instability and domestic controversy. Domestic tensions reached a peak during events such as the Kent State shootings in 1970. These incidents reflected the deep divisions within American society and highlighted the far-reaching impact of the war beyond the battlefield. As Vietnamization progressed, U.S. troops gradually withdrew from the conflict. This shift placed greater responsibility on South Vietnamese forces, altering the balance and dynamics of the war significantly. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam faced increasing pressure as it assumed a larger role in combat operations. While efforts were made to strengthen its capabilities, its ability to withstand sustained attacks remained uncertain. In 1972, North Vietnamese forces launched the Easter Offensive, a large-scale conventional attack that tested South Vietnam's defenses. This marked a shift from earlier guerrilla tactics to more traditional forms of warfare. In response, the United States launched Operation Linebacker, a series of air campaigns designed to disrupt enemy supply lines and slow their advance. These operations represented some of the most intense aerial bombardments of the war. The Paris Peace Accords of 1973 aimed to establish a ceasefire and facilitate the withdrawal of U.S. forces. While they marked a step toward ending direct involvement, they did not fully resolve the conflict between North and South Vietnam. Following the agreements, American forces completed their withdrawal, leaving South Vietnam to continue the conflict largely on its own. This transition significantly altered the strategic situation on the ground. With U.S. forces gone, North Vietnam intensified its military efforts, preparing for a decisive campaign to reunify the country. The balance of power shifted increasingly in its favor. In 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, leading to the collapse of the South Vietnamese government. This event marked the end of the Vietnam War and the reunification of the country under communist leadership. The end of the war triggered widespread displacement, with many individuals fleeing the country in search of safety. The humanitarian impact was significant and continued to affect populations long after the conflict ended. Vietnam faced the immense challenge of rebuilding after years of war. Infrastructure, economy, and society required extensive recovery efforts in the aftermath of prolonged conflict and destruction. Memorials such as the Vietnam Veterans Memorial were established to honor those who served and those who lost their lives. These sites became places of reflection, symbolizing both sacrifice and remembrance. The Vietnam War influenced military thinking around the world, particularly in dealing with guerrilla warfare and unconventional conflicts. Its lessons continue to shape modern strategies. Media coverage during the war brought the realities of combat into people's homes. This unprecedented level of exposure played a major role in shaping public opinion and influencing political decisions. Many veterans returning from the war faced challenges adjusting to civilian life. Their experiences highlighted the personal cost of the conflict and the long-term effects on those who served. The environmental impact of the war, especially from chemical use, left lasting damage. Ecosystems were altered, and health effects persisted for generations, illustrating the long-term consequences of warfare. The Vietnam War was a significant part of the broader Cold War, reflecting the global struggle between competing ideologies and influencing international relations during that period. In the decades following the war, Vietnam gradually rebuilt and developed as a unified nation. Economic growth and modernization marked a new chapter in its history. Historians and analysts continue to study the Vietnam War, examining its causes, strategies, and consequences. Their work helps deepen understanding of one of the most complex conflicts of the modern era. The lessons of Vietnam remain relevant today, influencing military planning and political decision-making. It stands as a reminder of the challenges and consequences of prolonged conflict. The Vietnam War stands as one of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century. Its legacy is defined not only by its battles, but by its lasting impact on societies, governments, and global relations, reminding future generations of the true cost of war.